I'm Tim Ventura from AmericanAntiGravity.com, and today I'm speaking to Brian Feeney, the team leader for the GoldenPalace.com DaVinci space project in the X Prize competition, which will be launching the Wildfire rocket. Well, Brian, to start right out, one of the technological innovations in your X Prize entry is that it's a balloon-launched rocket. The rocket starts out at 80,000 feet closer to space, which reduces the amount of onboard fuel required to make the ascent. I've heard a lot of good things about this idea from a number of sources. How does the balloon assist increase your overall time for ascent in comparison to the other competing teams?
Well, Tim, the major advantage is that we're raising the Earth. We all saw the successful flights of Burt Rutan and Scaled Composites, Mojave Aerospace Adventures, and they flew up to somewhere between 45 to 50,000 feet. We're actually going to go from 71,000 feet. We are capable of going at various altitudes, but 71,000 has worked out to be an ideal number for us. And that reduces the size of the ship, the payload, not the payload, but the amount of fuel and everything else on board. The reality of it, and the irony of it, ultimately is that our spacecraft is heavier than Spaceship One, and yet it's launching from a higher altitude. And this is one of the creative things we've been able to bring to the whole venture, and that is by going as high as we can with a reasonably cost-effective balloon solution, we were able to use, in some cases, lower-cost valves that are heavier that we end up having to carry the weight of, and hence the extra fuel for, but we make up for it by getting that much higher, which reduces the drag.
Absolutely. Now, in terms of the contest, I guess the overall time to get into position probably doesn't matter. But in terms of the commercial marketplace, does it add a fair amount of time doing the balloon lift to get it up to the 71 thou?
Well, the balloon lift and the launch concept, as we've put it together, and the balloon is finished, we're really just going to finish off what we started off with the X Prize, and that is to demonstrate that we can do what we were going to do for the X Prize itself, and that is do a couple of flights into space. The balloon is an interesting concept, but it's, in my mind, it's not a good long-term reusable solution for frequent access to space. The balloon itself is not very expensive, but the helium is very costly.
Sure.
Also, environmentally, there's not a lot of helium left in the world, and I'm pretty environmentally conscious in that sense. So, consuming mammoth amounts of helium for trying to do a launch every other day would be quite a bit not so good for the environment. But the most important thing is that when you go commercial, you've really got to have a system that's maybe taking off from the ground, possibly dropped from an aircraft such as White Knight. Or in the case of our second-generation design, it's got turbines on it, and it takes off right from the runway, flies to 40,000 feet, fires two of the engines that we're developing for Wildfire, goes into space, does a stalled Spaceship One style reentry, and then turns on the turbofans and lands again.
Okay. Well, one of the key ideas behind the X Prize in general is not only in fostering relatively low-cost private space travel, but also in facilitating the development of out-of-the-box style innovations. In addition to the balloon, what are some of the other innovations that your team has developed?
I guess the engine itself, both our team and Scaled Composites team, Burt Rutan, went forward with ultimately a hybrid engine. Both he and we looked at liquid oxygen kerosene or a liquid-liquid system. I suppose we looked at it for a longer period of time than he did. But ultimately, the hybrid had the attractiveness that we wanted in terms of both cost and safety. For any of your listeners that don't know what a hybrid is, it's simply a liquid oxidizer, of which there can be nitrous oxide, liquid oxygen, and there are a few others, such as ammonia, combined with some type of solid fuel. HTPB, or rubber, is what Burt Rutan used. We're using a paraffin-based or wax-based core with some proprietary additives and support structure on the inside to make it work. And that's probably one of the most innovative things we've been able to bring to the engine side of things. We've developed a very cost-effective, reliable engine that has exceptional performance for a hybrid. We're getting maybe about 2 or 3% better ISP, or specific impulse, in terms of the wax itself. But at the same time, the making of the wax core and the cost of the wax is considerably less than using HTPB. Wax itself, or paraffin, is very much in the JP10 or jet fuel category in terms of the chemical chain. It's very similar in that sense. It's somewhat environmentally more cleaner than the HTPB or solid rubber fuel as well.
Absolutely. Well, I was talking to a NASA engineer yesterday who actually mentioned the paraffin system, and he said that really the sky's the limit in terms of how it could be developed in the future also.
There are many possibilities that one can do with it. We've had some thoughts and notions about liquefying it, and at some point, if you're going down that road, you kind of go, well, why don't we just put jet fuel on board? There's a lot of creative things that can be done with it. One of the greatest challenges that we had really is that it has a high regression rate, but it has a tendency to crack. Pick up a wax candle at home, put it on the dinner table for Christmas dinner, and someone slips a little bit, and suddenly you get a cracked wax candle. So a lot of our engineering and effort has gone into how to make cores. I mean, we're making cores that are 8 feet long and 24 inches in diameter already, and have been doing so for a while, which is a massive amount of wax. We built our own wax melting machine, and we've got horizontal spinning devices, vertical spinning devices, and we're working with about 1,000 pounds of wax at a time, and we've been able to develop some additives that go into the wax, plus some matrices on the inside that help to hold everything together. So, those combinations are making it work for us.
Absolutely. Well, a lot of people have been calling the X Prize space travel for rich people, but your project is different. You're running a nonprofit organization based on a lean, mean combination of volunteer labor and materials. Has this made your project more difficult than some of the high roller entrants, and is it worth the extra effort to demonstrate that an open grassroots approach can make this kind of an impact?
Well, we would certainly have loved to have had the big money come through the door, but that was never a reality. We fought for years with only having had just a few $100,000 of cash capital available to us. And when we finally concluded that getting, quotes, real money was going to be difficult, I would never let the lack of money be an excuse not to get the project done. So we further evolved the whole volunteer effort. We expanded the base not only across the country, but to Russia and other parts of the world. And we're currently something around maybe total 600 people plus 150,000 man hours. And the justification for that is simply, we're a group of people that want to do this. These are grassroots individuals in terms of forethought and enterprise that want to get together and demonstrate that they also can do this sort of thing. And that's what the DaVinci project is about. It's core inspiration internally and education on the outside, as well as inspiration as well on the outside. So we're more than happy to proceed along. Every time we run up against one of these barriers, usually it's of a financial nature, and we fight to get a few more dollars here and there to put us over the top. And at some point, hopefully before the end of 2005, we will have pulled it all together, be all finished, and be spaceborne. And I think if we can do that, and people see that we've done it for 1/20th the cost of what Burt Rutan has done it for. Although I wouldn't necessarily recommend the same approach again. It has been frustrating over the years. It'll be 9 years in May for me. It certainly shows that you can do the seemingly impossible if you bring the most important ingredient together, and that is talented people.
Sure. Well, the American Anti-Gravity website it has really kind of a focus on the anti-gravity community, and there's a lot of really wonderful research being done. And again, the talented people that you just mentioned are throughout this community. But one of the community problems has been that it's pretty much perpetually broke. And since you've been able to pull the nonprofit together, I was wondering if you'd have any advice for nonprofits like even American Anti-Gravity. We're in the process of becoming incorporated as a nonprofit for obtaining sponsors.
Yeah, PR. The X Prize generated in total of about 30 billion media impressions over the 8.5 years that it ran, and a good portion of those were generated in the last 2 years. And then a major chunk of that was within the last 9 months leading up to the late summer, early fall flights of Spaceship One. We've had a very good and massive PR effort constantly throughout our project's history. And out of those 30 billion media impressions, we did about 7 billion of them, which is substantial. If you put that in dollar terms, in terms of what the market has to pay to go and buy media impressions out there, it's roughly plus or minus $500 million, depending on whether you're in high-end or low-end markets on the media side. It's a very quantifiable number. What you've got to do is you've got to communicate that credibly to prospective sponsors to say, listen, we can get you exposed out there. We can do something that and do it very cost effectively for the sponsors and the amount of cash that we've received. And we've also received about $3.5 to $4 million of in-kind sponsorship as well from companies. We've provided an absolutely amazing return on investment when you consider the total value of cash and in-kind is maybe about $3.5 to $4 million, and we've generated about $500 million in media value. That's a very, very good return. It's you can't few and far between the opportunities to go to the marketplace and buy that. So you've really got to pull it together and conduct that kind of campaign.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, and that's definitely something I'm going to have to take a little bit closer look at in the future. But time is still in some way on our side. So, well, the next one, and I had trouble writing this one, but the big gag this year seems to be tossing things in the cabin. Burt Rutan's pilot tossed a bag of M&Ms while they were in space, and if I flew, I'd be tossing my lunch. Any lunchtime gags that you've thought of performing for the viewing audience?
Well, we're going to be conducting the first casino in space with our partner GoldenPalace.com, our prime sponsor. So I'll be betting from a remote onboard computer, and I believe the game is it's the One-Armed Bandit, and so we'll be doing that. We're also taking up the Beckham Ball. The Beckham Ball was David Beckham, the footballer originally out of the UK, kicked it into the stadium during the European Cup last year, and Golden Palace bought that for about $40,000 for charity purposes. So we're going to take it into space, and then it'll go on tour for fundraising purposes. We're also taking the Ellen DeGeneres Cabbage Patch doll. It's going to be like a toy box up there. The Ellen DeGeneres Cabbage Patch doll and the George Bush Cabbage Patch doll, both of which were bought online by Golden Palace, and these are being purchased or have been purchased. They'll be taken into space. And in the case of the Ellen doll, it's going to be donated back to Ellen, and then she's going to run a charity auction again to sell this doll, having been to space, to raise more money for her favorite charities. So we're going to be doing a few things of that nature, and then I've got a couple other little surprises that we'll hold on to.
Wonderful. Sounds like you guys are really raising the bar on kind of the media perspective, I guess. But
well, going to space is it's all about the experience, but it's also in the future about having fun. There's the techno crowd, and more particularly the sort of crowd that gets involved in the DaVinci project and says, yes, I want to design, I want to engineer, I want to build hardware, I want to be in there, and I want to be dirty in the shop. And that type of person really loves the gee whiz side of it. There are many an engineer that don't have a pilot's license that build and design airplanes. But the greater percentage of people simply want to go there and have fun, and they want to enjoy the experience.
Absolutely.
I'll be the first one to say that, I suspect the Russians are well ahead of us on this one anyways, and the French are probably right behind them, that, sex in space is an opportunity, not something to be looked down at or a barrier. It's all about going up there, having fun, having a different experience, and, we've maintained our sense of humor throughout this very serious project throughout the years, and are going to continue to, treat it with the proper level of kit gloves it needs from a technology and reliability and safety standpoint, but at the same time, have some fun with it.
Absolutely. Well, what kind of technological concessions have you had to make because of the time crunch in building this? NASA had 10 years to prepare for the Apollo missions, but they already had an established infrastructure for putting rockets in space. If you had more time and a larger budget, how would it have affected the design decisions that you made?
Well, the more operative thing there is that if we had a larger budget, cash-wise, then we wouldn't have actually needed more time. We had designed, if you look at our website, there's a prototype on the website. It's all painted yellow and red, and it's full scale. It's about 25 feet long, 4.5 feet in diameter, and that was built around the original microcosm liquid oxygen kerosene engines. And in fact, that prototype was built to fly to about 100,000 feet, and it's flight rated. And we were going to demonstrate certain aspects of the mission with that, and then go forward and build essentially the same thing, capable of going to space. And we lacked the capital to buy the engines as a plug-and-play system from Microcosm, and consequently had to look at alternatives. And eventually, in terms of infrastructure, we've done everything from scratch here. We developed our own spacesuit from scratch, which is one of my specialty backgrounds, life support systems. But we developed the engine system from scratch, our own thermal protection system. We've done it all. You name it, from seats to engines to flight guidance. We could not afford to buy an integrated INS GPS, so we got a small inertial measurement unit, IMU, and combined it with a GPS, and began writing the software, and got a flight control, or got a computer or box that we could use for flight control, and are integrating all this together for flight control purposes. And it's costing just as much money and time versus buying it, except that the labor is available on a volunteer basis, and the cash is not there to spend the $25,000 to $50,000 to buy something that's more operable off the shelf. So we treat these as opportunities every time they come along, and that's kind of, so be it. We'll do that, and if we have to lay all the foundation everywhere, then we do so. I mean, we were the second group in the world next to Burt Rutan to actually get government approval, which was for a manned space flight, as well as get our insurance, and that was, I think, quite a chore and quite an accomplishment as well.
Definitely. Well, one of American Anti-Gravity's chief goals is to promote the development of anti-gravity technologies as a future alternative to contemporary rockets. And I guess this is kind of a two-part question. First, do you have any thoughts on GCT Space being rejected from the contest as the only anti-gravity entrant? And second, are you familiar with any of the work that's been done in anti-gravity research?
Well, I'm a very forward-thinking individual, and I've got my eyes wide open and ears wide open, and in recent times I've had some discussions with people that have had some insightful ideas. I think the first thing you got to do is change your name and change the marketing positioning, whether we like it or not. The concept of anti-gravity as it is portrayed out there, it's only slightly ahead of ufologists in terms of people taking it serious. The point is that people in the research community take their work very seriously. So this is not saying anything negative about your organization, yourself, or any of your patrons and people involved. But the public on the outside, you hear about anti-gravity, and they just don't either get it, or they're referring to some movie or some discussion, and they just don't see the seriousness in it. Anti-gravity is simply, our spacecraft today is anti-gravity. It uses a rocket engine to lift itself off the ground, overcome gravity, and yet it has nothing to do with new physics modifying space-time continuums and all the various ways and means and Hall effect and you name it that are portrayed as being possible or not in the field of anti-gravity. So I think there's a little bit of marketing work to do there to maybe reposition the style of how you're communicating it. I went through the site and I noted a few concepts in there which had nothing to do with the classic idea of anti-gravity. And there was, I think in your email you referred to, alternative propulsion or very advanced propulsion concepts. And if you look at the way NASA did it, they actually conducted studies, and I'm not sure if they're still ongoing or not, but these are pretty recent, where they were looking into what the media immediately called anti-gravity, but they positioned it as extreme alternative propulsion system technologies, including warp drives and everything else. And I think if you look at maybe repositioning the idea of what it is you're trying to do, that you may find a friendlier and broader audience out there for it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely been a consideration, although one of the things that's been really surprising, I would say, just over the last 2 years, we've had a tremendous influx and interest from NASA, the Defense Department, a number of different letter agencies, and then engineers at all of the major aerospace companies. And I think part of it is that there is a downside to the term anti-gravity, but I think the dramatic upside to it is that people immediately get it, And I think a lot of the breakthrough propulsion terminology that's been kicked around, some of it by NASA, but by other organizations as well, tends to completely lose the public. And so, I don't know, I've had to kind of weigh that debate on both sides.
Yeah, I mean, breakthrough propulsion connotes the idea that, well, something's pushing it. I guess there's exhaust gases coming at it or something like that. And on the other hand, if you're able to have a gravity wave or electromagnetic wave or something be able to push an object forward or overcome, the 9.8 meters per second of accelerative force. And if you can't see it, then it must be, anti-gravity. The truth and the marketing terms are somewhere in between. Maybe there's a hybrid of a marketing notion there that needs to be reconsidered from the institutional side, looking down, and the organizations like yourselves and others looking up and looking for a greater and wider audience.
Sure.
There is no question that when you say the words anti-gravity, that people they do get it, but I think unfortunately they also they get one aspect of it, and it those that are serious about it and capable of doing real research in the field lose a little bit of credibility by virtue of the general notion of how people have looked at it and laughed at it. At the same time, on the other hand, don't worry about it in that sense. Never stop what you're doing. Go forward. Don't pay attention to others. You run your own life. You have your own ideas. This is the greater you, and if you can, stick with what you have and make a breakthrough, then suddenly the word anti-gravity will be the million-dollar phrase.
Sure. Well, when most of us face a major challenge in life, we tend to focus in on meeting the challenge head-on before thinking about what comes after that. That being said, when you finish the X Prize competition, what comes next?
Well, it's like building a yacht. It's like bigger, faster, farther, more capable. We definitely have a plan of going commercial with a suborbital spacecraft. It actually has a project name to it. It's called the Project Tiger, and it's an 8-person vehicle. It has one pilot, a co-pilot seat that could be a paying passenger seat if we wanted, but it's one pilot and 7 seats. It uses 3 small turbine engines to get to 40,000 feet. Uses 2 of our engines to take it all the way up, and is a stalled style wing re-entry. Not exactly the same as what Spaceship One has done, but certainly influenced by them, and then gets into a flight mode again and lands on a runway. So we're absolutely wanting to pursue that following a demonstration flights, hopefully prior to the end of this year. Ultimately, and the ultimate goal is to get to orbit and stay there, and we certainly have our eyes on that and our ideas and our ability to pursue an orbital demonstrator. It's the little early days to talk about it in any serious detail at this point. Other than that, we certainly have something we want to do and are capable of doing it. Back to the suborbital commercial tourism business, the opportunity and goal is to establish 10 flight centers around the world over the next decade. One of them in Canada, the U.S., and Caribbean, and Micronesia, and Japan, and so forth, and Mediterranean, and take as many people as we can and are willing to actually go up there and have some fun.
Absolutely, it's a wonderful idea, and I definitely, when you guys start selling commercial flights, I would like to be on one at some point. But now for the X Prize launch date, any ideas when the actual launch date for this rocket will be, and any ideas on where I could tune in to see it on TV?
Well, the idea of I can't I won't give out a date at this point, only in the context that we tried as best we could to go for and fly in the X Prize itself. Not everything worked out the way we needed it to and wanted it to, and we continued to run into some barriers throughout the fall. We're hard at work right now. We have 3 more engine tests next week, for instance, with our engine, and we're qualifying all the hardware and building away. The only general phrase I'll put out at this point is that we're still trying to do this prior to the snow flying in 2005. As we get closer, within a couple of months of that date, we'll start to put it out so the public can see it, and either through our website, the X Prize, and/or through public media. I think you'll more than come across it, hopefully.
Absolutely. Well, we're just about out of time for today, but one of the things I was hoping to ask is if you have a web address that the public can visit to learn a little bit more about the DaVinci project and the Golden Palace space program.
Yeah, our web address is DaVinciProject.com. That's all word, and it's as in Leonardo da Vinci, DaVinci, project.com, and there's a lot of interesting things on there. A whole new website to come over the next 3 or 4 weeks, by the way, for those that have been there before and are looking for more and new updates. If anyone is in the Toronto area or the GTA area here in Canada, starting 2 weeks yesterday, we'll be conducting public seminars on the DaVinci project. The first one we'll be talking about our entire mission, the details behind it, and then every 2 weeks we'll be running through every major system: propulsion, avionics, flight guidance, landing systems, airbags, you name it. There are many young adults and adults of all ages that join rocketry associations, not only in Canada but in the U.S., and learn how to do serious high-power rocketry. And moving up to, say, about a 1,000-pound thrust engine is pretty much the limit of what you can buy out there. And that was the first engine that we ever built. That's where we started from, and they have moved up towards our 18,000-pound thrust engine, which is sizable and everything else. So we want to provide an opportunity, especially, the DaVinci project's all about education, inspiration for people to get involved that hopefully may wish to get involved as volunteers and working with us, but at the same time they'll get exposure in how you actually conduct and build a manned space program, a manned rocket, and the technologies behind the bigger pieces of hardware. So there'll be an announcement on the website sometime next week. And again, anyone in the GTA, the address will be there, and more than welcome to come down.
Great. Well, thanks again, and I definitely look forward to seeing your X Prize flight.